There we go. So we're now recording. Welcome to Future Jazz Journalists. This is the first call that we're giving this a try of having a Zoom video call with Jazz Journalists Association members, and I'm really grateful, Howard, for the invitation to set up this sandbox for us to play in together and see what we can get done. So it would be helpful for me. I know some of you, and some of you by line, and some of you I've met in person along the way. But it would be really helpful for me to just give everybody a chance to introduce themselves real quick, say where you're coming from, and maybe one question that you're bringing in, or one like burning issue that you want us to be diving into as we start to do this work together. And let's do it just sort of popcorn style. So whoever would like to speak can speak, and then from there you can pass it to somebody else. Everyone's names are here, so you can just pick somebody else and then they'll go next. And I can see that some of you are already have some familiarity with Zoom, and it does tend to be easier to for when we're speaking one at a time, or if you're not speaking, to mute your microphone. So to mute and unmute your microphone, this is one of the first things that you do in Zoom. There's a little button in the lower left-hand corner. It says mute. If you click that, you won't be heard. I can also, because I'm the meeting host, mute and unmute people. So sometimes if I see you talking and you forgot to unmute yourself, I might unmute you. So that's the first step. So someone can get us started. Just what your name, where you are, and a question or agenda item that you're bringing in for our.
This is Neil. I'm in Chicago. Neil Tesser. Hi guys, nice to see you all. Or is John speaking now? John?
No, I'm just putting a thing in the chat window.
Okay, so should I go ahead, Alex?
Yeah, go ahead, Neil.
Yeah, I'm in Chicago. I've been writing here for a long time. I know most of you guys. I've also been on and off on the air quite frequently. I'm I think a founding member of the, is that right, Howard? I'm a founding member of the Jazz Journalists Association. I'm also been quite involved with, although who wants to hear that now, the Grammys over the years. They'll figure that out one of these days. But the reason I stayed involved in that is because I have some influence over the integrity of the awards process as it pertains to jazz. You've heard a lot perhaps about the integrity being disparaged. Most of that is completely wrong. That's another discussion. And the reason that I've maintained any interest in the Grammys, which like all of us we feel is kind of not really connected to the universe, is in order to be able to make sure that there's some integrity in a process that goes into a very widely considered organization. And even though jazz is a small part of it, that's why I've stayed involved with that. I have no idea why I've just spun off on that particular tangent. So I'm now going to pass this along to Andrew.
Thanks, Neil. Andy Gilbert here. Andrew, I'm in Berkeley. I'm a full-time freelancer, been full-time since about '99. And I'm really, I sort of see our main challenge is keeping work flowing, like looking for opportunities to write, sort of whatever it is we do as journalists, and get paid for it. And there's the Bay Area, there's actually quite a lot of interesting stuff going on with sort of community journalism that's actually funded in various ways. So things don't look quite as bleak as they did maybe a few years ago, but I'm interested in any and all people's experience and, how we can keep working ourselves and find opportunities for younger, up and coming writers to get in the field and actually feel like they have, a viable path through it.
Both
Hey,
Andy and Neil are board members of the JJA, by the way.
Peter, why don't you take it?
yeah, okay, thanks, Andy. I relate to what you're saying because, in fact, you look like you're from Berkeley, Andy, and I used to be from Berkeley myself, one of my favorite spots in the world. Um, and I'm kind of like you because I'm relatively a newcomer to this whole thing. I've been writing about jazz since I guess since the 90s, and my beat, if you will, is I'm more in the historic aspect of it. I'm working on a book about Joe Oliver, and I'm writing about I write about, well, recently I've been writing a lot about this new tremendous resurgence of traditional jazz that's going on all over the world, which I think is very important. Howard and I have talked about this a little bit, so that's sort of where I am, and because I think that resurgence. I have a little slogan that I use, which is, if the roots die, so does the tree. So that's where I stand. And I'm just very excited by this going on because it's bringing a lot more people into jazz, young people. Okay, that's me. I'm in Newton, Massachusetts, by the way.
I'm Susan Brink. I live in the capital region of New York, Schenectady. I am the jazz music director for the Hudson Mohawk Radio Network. I do some writing, and I'm a board member of the JJA. And my bottom toolbar has grayed out. So whatever was in the chat is no longer there, and I can't access it. And my interest is how I can use this to communicate with people working on the Jazz Heroes. I think it's going to be very helpful in creating teams and information in real time that we can share. So that's what I'm excited about.
Good point. Alex, help her with that grayed out
Yeah.
toolbar.
Because you said you put a link in and I saw two. It was an orange color and there was one and then there were two. And I went to, and before I could even get it up, the whole bar grayed out, and other than share, which is still green. And when I hit on chat, there's nothing in there. And there were,
Are you using your computer?
I am. It's a MacBook.
Is the window maximized, or like is it just part of the screen?
It's not maximized
Try that.
because it wasn't, and it was working fine. Enter full screen. There we go.
Susan, are you using the app or are you looking at this in your browser?
Oh, look at that. I'm using my browser and it became orange and I have one chat.
There you go.
Okay.
Yeah, sometimes it's just a little playing around with things like maximizing or changing where the window is and stuff.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. All right. Someone else like to introduce themselves? We got it. So Rob, by the way, is listening. His video isn't working, but he did introduce himself in the chat here, so you can read Rod's chat to everybody as his introduction. And then anybody else like to introduce yourself?
You jumped in.
Okay, hi there. You may recognize a very deep South accent from New Zealand. And my patch is New Zealand and Australian improvised music. I'm happy to range across all improvised music. And I try not to write on anything other than that. And I travel a bit. I'm recently back from New Orleans, which was an eye-opener for me. It was, it was extraordinary. And I've been blogging for about nearly 10 years on jazz, so I give it away. I get some liner notes jobs and I do photography for albums, and I'm associated with some local labels. But there's a very active scene here, but like all scenes, that there is an interconnectedness and also a separation. So we interact a lot with Australia, reasonably often with New York and with Europe. So yeah, plenty busy. Luckily I'm retired, so I've got a pension, so I can give it away. And it's nice to hear Susan, even though I can't see her, because Susan has been an extraordinary help to me, and she, along with Howard, but particularly Susan, has been such a strong link for me, and we share information, and she's been very good in promoting some of the Australasian, New Zealand and Australian albums that she's taken a fancy to on her show. And that feels really important to me, that thing of sharing.
I'll keep the international flow going. I'm James Hale. I know most of you guys, lady, and it's great to see you all again. And so I'm based in Ottawa, in Canada. And Howard and I think Neil and maybe John as well, we've been trying this before with the JJA back in the 90s, using the digital tools that were available in those days. On Friday, I had an opportunity to moderate 2 panels here in Ottawa at the Ottawa International Jazz Festival's Winter Jazz Festival with some folks from Germany and Norway and other places in Europe, and some musicians and other journalists. And we were talking about digital media and talking about how digital technology is changing what we do. And I guess my specific wish for this would be that we could use this digital tool to do what we've always been trying to do, since the 90s: connect people, brainstorm ideas, develop our personal scenes, our personal beats, just all those things. Because I heard so much enthusiasm from the audience members we had on Friday, and also the panelists, in terms of what digital can do for us, as opposed to how it is making it challenging for us and changing the old model, both for artists and for audiences. So I'd like to see us do some positive things.
All right, I'll hop in and introduce myself a little bit in this spirit too. I know I got a little bit of an intro from Howard, but I just wanted to say that, so first of all, I'm living in East Hampton, Massachusetts, which is in the western part of Massachusetts, about an hour and a half outside of Boston. And for me, the desire has been to kind of like James was saying, I've always been struck by how the JJA has held space for, a kind of collaborative ethos in the jazz world. And, journalism, it can get like kind of individualistic and a little cutthroat sometimes. And this has always felt like a place that, people are kind of looking out for each other. And I feel like, like James was saying, these tools might be a way to actually help us do that, and maybe kind of take a little bit more leadership in the jazz ecosystem, and with that spirit of collaboration and looking out for each other and looking out for the sort of whole ecosystem, or the whole beat. Let's see, and there's a couple more: David and Howard and John.
Hi, David Bassey here. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
All right. I'm coming in from Kansas City, and I'm a musician.
What state is that in, David?
Well, if you're from here, it's from Missouri. But if
That had to
you're
come,
not from here, lots of times rock bands will get on the stage and say, "Hello, Kansas," and everybody will boo.
David, can you speak up, please?
Yeah.
Sure, I can. I can turn my.
It's good to see you.
A little bit too. Yeah, I'd like to see you too, Neil. I'm a musician, vocalist, and a drummer, band leader, and I got into radio around the turn of the century at Kansas Public Radio, University of Kansas, and then into a show called 12th Street Jump, and I'm still involved in that. And I'm involved in another show called Jazz with David Bassey, which is a like Bob Perlocha-esque kind of show, 15 hours of jazz a week. And so I'm pretty busy doing radio, playing a little bit, and like that. And I've also started working with what's called Jam magazine here in Kansas City, and I'm the editor of the magazine. Hard to even say that in front of a crowd like this, but our latest issue. And I'm just deep into jazz, and wanted to reconnect with this group of people. I had reached out to Howard a couple of weeks ago, and so it's good to be a part of this.
Likewise, I guess I'm left with the bad jokes. My name's John Ciccona. I've been kind of a low-profile guy because I had a day job that I just retired from in November. I moved from Erie, Pennsylvania, where I did, radio shifts for years and emceed the Outdoor Jazz Festival in August. So I moved to Cleveland in November, got married, and retired. So I've got time on my hands. I'd like to do what I want to do lately, which is this kind of work. In my previous job, I used to run Zoom seminars for a university. But no, I'm not going to debug it. Everything looks fine here. So I've got a little time. I don't know that there's any JJ presence in Cleveland. I looked for Carlo Wolf. He didn't seem to be here, or Talon. And there is a scene here. And coming from Erie, Pennsylvania, it seems like New York to me. So the scene doesn't get a lot of coverage. The Rock Hall takes up a lot of oxygen here in a declining media environment, except in Kansas City, where they have a dedicated music magazine. And so I think there's opportunity here. And I don't know, I'm a Tocquevillian, I guess. I've always been a joiner, and I do believe in the JJ's mission. And as somebody who was out in the jazz weeds in Erie, Pennsylvania, this connected me to the scene in a way that I really needed when some of my magazine assignments evaporated. So, and you guys, I read you all the time. You're my idols and my teachers. So I'm just thrilled to be here, and I want to do what I can. The music is at a very interesting place right now, very interesting place. And I think we have a lot of opportunities if we can galvanize the interest that I think is out there, the latent interest. So thank you for inviting me. Look forward to doing stuff. I have a lot of time to do it.
That's great, John. I'm Howard Mandel. I'm the president of the JJA. And there Susan is. Now you can see her, John Fenton. It's really great to see all of you. And, I don't know that I've ever met John Ciccona before in person. And I know I haven't met John Fenton. And I haven't met David either. So, or Peter, not in person, or Rob. So
Hey, Howard, you got a bad memory. You and I met John Ciccona before.
Where? In
New York.
In New York. Okay.
Oh, God.
Bad memory. It's a bad memory. But
it is a very bad memory.
I'm interested in what we're all saying here. I like that Susan brought in the Jazz Heroes thing, which is a JJA, project that Andy works on, and in the past, Alex has worked on too. That's coming up. But I think that this particular discussion can be much more open than that. And I was interested in what James had to say about the project. What can the digital media be doing for us as opposed to it being a challenge? I mean, I think it really could work in this kind of consultation, and we can choose some projects to work towards. But are you thinking about the kinds of things that Andy was talking about, or paying gigs, ways to get paid for our work, express ourselves for money?
Great.
Crazy though that is.
No,
and John, you don't sound, John Fenton, you don't sound retired at all. Maybe, you're not on the rat race, but you're working your butt off.
Sorry, yeah, that's very kind of you to say, Howard. But yeah, I actually celebrated my 70th the other day, and I hired some music students from Auckland University Jazz School, and I said, you need to do 70s fusion for me. They had no idea what I was asking them to do, well, only a vague idea, and they killed it. It was free, and it was, yeah. So that's what keeps you young. Listen, I've just got a comment. I'm increasingly interested in Bandcamp, and I'll tell you the relevance of this. A lot of artists down under, you know, the distribution isn't there, but it's about artists gaining control. And what I'm particularly interested in, some of my Australian friends who have record labels, they're getting stuff out in extraordinarily high fidelity. I mean, really high fidelity, 32-bit, etc. And what's relevant to this conversation is we got liner notes back, we've got cover art in you know, good quality, good resolution. So it's a small sign that things are starting to move back from those big three who control everything and who care about nothing.
Very good point. If anybody here follows Matt Merowitz, his social feed, he has some interesting things to say, and he was advocating in the strongest possible terms for Bandcamp earlier this week. It was an interesting thread. If you're on the Evil Blue Network, check it out. Or we could invite Matt to tell us about it.
See, this is a perfect. It's already happening, right? That where the ideas are starting to bubble up as we just gather together with our questions and our you know, axes that we're grinding. This is you know, and yeah, I mean, inviting someone like Matt to be in this space could be there are ways. Part of the reason why I'm, you know, bringing this energy in is because I really feel like there are ways to benefit from that, you know, a Facebook thread is designed to you know, get our attention and then disappear, right? And so, you know, sell us ads in the process while we see the next thing that comes along. You know, we could be having these conversations and building our own internal archive that could be you know, holding the space in a way that's designed for a different kind of purpose, right? And so that's the kind of goal for me is to get us exploring how we can do that together. And I feel like my thought for kind of how we would spend our time today was that we could after doing what we just did, to just kind of orient a little bit. For me to kind of lay out my sort of roadmap of communication and organizing translocally, and how some of these digital tools work in that way. And then we can, after I kind of intro some of that, then we can actually start to think together about test cases, things that we could try, ideas that we might want to work on together. And then I can take notes, and then I can start then I can follow up with people and kind of guide folks to sort of into these systems that we're building with that intention as we build them. So right now, you know, I've got the account set up, but Howard and I are the only ones who have even like logged in yet, right? So we're going to be building it as we go, and that's one of my favorite parts actually about doing this kind of organizing work, is like getting it started. So I'm really looking forward to doing that and seeing what works and what doesn't. And yeah, it's a process that's appropriate for improvisers. So yeah, so I'll start off just by kind of laying out my framework for why we're using these different tools to do different things, and what those different things are. Because unfortunately, this is one of the just truths of tech, basically, is that there's never, the more things a tool does, the less well it does all of them, right? So, you know, there are lots of companies, tools, technologies, right, that have tried to like do everything for everybody, and that, you know, get people in that way. And inevitably, some other competitor comes up that does one of the things better, and then everyone starts using that, and it creates this dynamic where we're never going to be able to be like, okay, this is the platform that's going to do everything that we need it to do. And so you know, what I've seen in some of the work that I've done both on the media end and also on the more kind of organizing and production kind of end of things, is that organizing groups of people to do things, it's about the process with the people first, right? And so the way that, yeah, I've already explained this to Howard, is that really the platform, the thing where all of this lives is with us as participants, right? It's the network of people who are participating that is kind of the ground for making this work. And you know, one of the unique things about this group of people is that we are literally on the ground in different places, right? Different time zones, different countries, different parts of the world. And that creates real challenges for doing the kinds of collaborative things that a group of people all sitting around a desk, like working on something together, can do, right? There's just kinds of communication and kinds of transmission and relationship building and like building trust and working together and you know, going through something not working and then working it out, like all of these kind of micro level team social kinds of interactions that impact what ends up actually happening. And so the idea behind the kind of communication infrastructure that I've set up is to create some tools that can not replicate, but kind of simulate some of those aspects of things so that it's kind of sticky enough for us all to be able to stay plugged in and to stay in touch with each other. And so basically there are 3 kinds of communication that make this work. And so the 3 kinds of communication, I'm going to write these down in the chat as I go, but I'm splitting them up into these 3 categories because these are kind of 3 different tools that we'll be using for the 3 kinds of communication. So the first kind of communication is real-time communication, which is what we're doing right now. You know, we're in space together, we're having conversation. And if I ask a question, you know, if I ask John a question, I could unmute his mic and he could answer right now because he's right there and I know he's right there and he's available, right? So that's the nature of real-time communication. And the tool that I'm envisioning us using for real-time communication, I'm going to share my screen real quick so you can see it, is called Slack. Some of you might have used Slack before. Is the Slack screen showing up for folks? You see something that says like 4 new messages.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
great. Okay, so this is what Slack looks like. And basically, it's like a box for our real-time communication, our chatting, our posting links, our you know, this kind of quick back and forth kind of communication. And the things that's helpful about Slack, one is that the search function is really effective. So if you need to find something, it's really easy to just search for it rather than have to like be like, oh, which email was that in? And like, what did I have it in this thing? And or which folder? It's like, it's really easy to use the search function. And then the other is that there are these conversations happen in channels. And so you can have kind of topics or themes or even geographical locations. Like if there's, you know, a couple of people that join John in Cleveland and making something happen in Cleveland, you could make a little Cleveland channel and the 3 of you could be in there and that's sort of the space where you can talk about things. And then it also keeps it, you know, there are ways that in these channels, they're kind of public to the group. So anyone who's interested in tracking it can kind of see what you're talking about and maybe even pop in with a question themselves. So you can see to type a message, you just type it in here. You have all of these, you know, you can attach files. You have the same kind of, you know, things that you would have in any kind of web editing thing. There's good emoji support. And you just type it in, and then it'll show up in the channel, and then everybody can see it. So that's one place where things are happening. And the good thing about it, like I said, this is for kind of real time back and forth. You know, if you have a quick question for the group, or an announcement about something that you're doing, this is a good place to kind of have a message board. It is also a place where when people are logged into the app, you can use it for direct messages. So I find this really helpful in particular as kind of a replacement for text messaging, especially when we're working with international folks, like, you know, obviously like just SMS messaging, which is mostly what we do in the US, like isn't gonna work. But even something like WhatsApp, this just makes a way that you don't need the person's phone number. It's if you're working on the same thing, they'll have a direct message, you know, a place where you can send them a direct message. So if I wanted to, you know, ask Howard a question, I just type it into the chat, and only Howard will see that. So that's and for me, the way I have it set up, you can see this is what it looks like on my desktop computer, but I also have the phone app installed so that I have it set so that during working hours, it'll send me a little ping to let me know that someone's sending me a message, like I was getting a text or something like that, that will kind of get my attention. So I know when I'm working on JJA things, I'll be available for people to be like, hey, Alex, you know, can you help me with this? Or what's the password for this? Or, you know, just how's it going? You know, like it's a space that kind of communication can happen really easily.
Alex?
Yeah, any questions about?
This is Neil. Does this work like email? In other words, if you weren't on the space right now and I sent you a message, would you get it later?
So yeah, that's in that sense, yeah. So if I wasn't on, I wouldn't necessarily get a notification, but it would still show up. So that when I logged in, you can see was basically what happens is the channels here. If there's a message that you haven't seen, it'll be like bold, kind of like an unread email. You know, like it's the same kind of thing. And so you can go and you can look at them that way.
So the way this is largely used is if several of us say, well, either set up an appointment to discuss something where we're all on Slack, or just you see someone else is on Slack and
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, like for me, for example, I just kind of have it up when I'm doing work at my computer.
Right.
So and you can see actually there's this little green circle here on the thing. That means that, you know, this person is active on Slack right now. So you could, you know, send them a little message or whatever. So it's available in that way. So that's the Slack part. Any other questions about just like what you're seeing as I'm introducing this, or kind of?
Hi, it's John Fenton here. Does it work? It'd work on an iPad, I take it?
Yes. Yeah. One of the good things about Slack is that it's a, you know, unicorn tech startup thing. So like they've got all of the integrations of everything and blah, blah, blah. It just works really well at the user level. We're using the free version, which basically after a certain number of messages, it stops keeping the archive of the messages. You have to like pay for the version that does that. But for our purposes, for this kind of real-time communication, it seems it's the kind of the industry standard. Any other questions about Slack or real-time communication as a part of this?
Well, yeah, one other. So I'm sorry, I don't know more about this. I've heard of Slack, but haven't had occasion to use it. So it's just a matter of my downloading it, adding it to my computer. And then when I do check in, how do I, you know, this is an invited group, right? So how would you have several things on the left that show different things you're working on. And JJ is obviously jazz journalists.
Right. Yeah. You can see that I'm in a few different groups. Yeah.
Right. So if I was to put this on my computer or just log into it,
Mhm.
how do I get access to Jazz Journalists Association?
Yeah, so we'll do that at the end. I can
Okay.
actually, hopefully we'll have some time to actually walk you through it. If not, I will have a detailed thing with all the links and how to do it, and you can reach out to me if you have questions. But basically, I invite you, and then you create an account and log in.
Got it. Okay.
One of the things about Slack, it does work on a web browser. I have it on here. You can see I have it like downloaded as a Windows app on my computer. And then also there are iOS and Android apps for your phone. So, depending on how you use it and how you want to sort of have it set up, there's just a couple of different ways that you can kind of download it to the spaces where you'll be communicating with people, right? So basically, like this computer that I'm talking to you on is kind of my portal to communication with other people. I download the Slack app on it so that it can help me be in communication. But yeah, everyone who was here tonight will get an invitation. I'll actually be able to just post a link into the chat here that we can use to log in at the end. And if there's not time, then there'll be ways to do that afterwards and in between.
Thank you.
Yeah. So that's Slack. That's real-time communication. The next part, I'm going to stop share for a second here. Yeah, so we've already got some mentions in the chat about integration, and I was actually going to talk about that at the end, but I will mention it since y'all are already talking about it. That one of the solutions to this problem of no one tool doing all of the things is that the tools that we've chosen have ways that they can automatically communicate with each other and integrate. So that's part of what creates a little bit more of a cohesive framework for communication, is when things that are happening on one app can kind of get tracked or read when someone is using the other one. So that is something that we can look at in the context of Loomio, which is for the app for asynchronous communication, is the second kind of communication that is normally the sort of paradigm. Our most common way of engaging in asynchronous communication is email, right? So the difference between like a chat and an email is that the email it takes a good solid couple of paragraphs email that like really is like getting at a point, or encouraging people to do a certain thing, or working out a decision that the group needs to be made. It takes a little bit more than just like, oh, I'm going to quick fire off this chat, and you don't expect a response quite in the same way either, right? Like I could send an email that's like, what are people's thoughts about this, using this resource? And over the next couple of days, people will check their email and they'll see it, and then when they have a minute, they'll take the time to respond. And then after those couple of days, we'll have kind of collected everybody's thoughts about the matter. But the time frame is a little bit different, right? It takes place over a period of days as opposed to a period of minutes. And so there's a way that the kind of the space is opened up for whatever the group is considering or hashing out together, and then it closes after a few days or hours or something like that. And so this is something where if you're using something like Slack to try and track something over days and it starts to get complex, it can get really overwhelming really quickly, because if everybody's kind of chiming in a long chat thread and all of a sudden there are like 40 different short messages, it becomes harder to follow the kind of meat of the conversation. These kinds of exchanges allow for a little bit more in-depth consideration, conversation to take place. And so this is the program that I'm encouraging us to work with for that is called Loomio. Now I'm going to put my screen share back on so you can see Loomio. Okay, so this is very bare bones at this point because we haven't really operated it. But what you see is essentially a forum for threaded conversations. You know, like a web forum from 20 years ago. It's basically that kind of idea where there are threads. You can see, for example, I made an introduction thread. There's some information at the top. And then there are comments. And you can leave a comment. Someone can add a comment. You can also react with, like, thumbs up or smiley face or whatever. And you can also reply to comments so that there's like a nested thread responding to any comment that is there. So pretty straightforward. What is really cool about Loomio, though, is that in addition to comments, you can run proposals and polls. So this is a way for and this is something that we'll take a little bit more time to develop, but there are ways that we can kind of come to some agreements about actually deciding things. And so let's say that we, are ready to take something on together as a group and someone wants to propose something. You can create a proposal, and then you can set it up so that the proposal closes in a certain amount of time. And during that window of time, while the proposal is open, people can respond with different voting options, like this one, agree, abstain, disagree, or consent, abstain, objection, or just agree, disagree, right? So we can set up different signals that people don't have to like weigh in with a whole email saying like, I don't agree with this, blah, blah, blah. They can just hit the button and agree and move on, or disagree and then leave a comment. Or so that's the proposal function. Is really helpful, especially when the group is trying to accommodate different lots of people with different ideas about what to do. Creates kind of a flat structure where anyone can propose something, and as long as there's agreements in place about how the group consents to it, then it allows things to move forward, rather than one of those like I've been on these 2-week-long email chains where people are like trying to decide like what font to use for the newsletter, and then someone else gets added to the CC email like 4 days into it, and then they have all of these other ideas, and then the whole thing gets derailed, and then this is designed to be a sort of tighter process for making decisions together when you can't all be in the room at the same time, right? Through this model of asynchronous communication. There are also some really useful poll options about just ways that people can kind of check in with each other and get information about what the group wants. So there are ways of setting up choices. Do we want to do this, or this, and then people vote. And maybe this one gets 6 and this one gets 3 and this one gets 1. That gives us some information about what people want to do. The count one is really useful for like just checking in with folks, like how many people here would be willing to spend 10 minutes helping us with this thing. Here's what you need to do, and then people can just check the box, right? And then we know, and then it's really easy to send a follow-up just to those people that check the box, things like that. And then time poll, if anyone has dealt with Doodle or when to meet or any of those, like there's a gazillion like it. This one is built into the platform so that people can actually just figure out when are people available to meet, to set up meeting times for something like a Zoom call, for example. So that is my brief introduction to Loomio. There's a lot more to get into the weeds with it, but basically just want to introduce this idea of this kind of being the place where asynchronous communication happens. This is basically replacing email. And for someone who deals with a lot of email, is such a godsend. Let me tell you, I love doing things on Loomio instead of email threads. I mean, I still answer a lot of emails, but this saves me so much time dealing with email, and I love it. Okay, so I'm gonna check in on the chat real quick, and then also if anybody has any questions, take a minute to formulate your questions. I'm going to read the chats here, see if there's anything, and then I'll take your questions about Loomio. Like a cock. Okay, right on. Yeah. So yeah, any other questions about Loomio? Okay, straightforward enough.
Do you
Oh,
have,
yeah.
I'm sorry, do you have Loomio and, no, you only log into Loomio every now and then. That's the asynchronous.
Right, it's like like logging into your email or something like that.
But you have
it's like something.
The other one open all the time on your desktop.
For me, that's how I use it. Yeah, I have Slack open just sort of whenever I'm working. And then Loomio is something I go to if I'm like if I was gonna be being like, okay, how are things, like what are people thinking through, or what are we working on in the JJA, circle right now? I would go to Loomio to see what polls are open, or what threads people are discussing things in. But Slack is like my kind of availability window where I actually get notifications. And on a related note, one of the integrations, one of the reasons why Loomio is really helpful is that they have an integration that automatically sends into the Slack channel any new thing that's happening in Loomio. So I'm gonna open up my screen share one more time so you can see this. Slack. So you can see there's it's called the Loomio bot, this little piece of code that anytime our Loomio group starts a new thread or there's a decision to be made, it sends it into Slack. So you actually don't even, to answer your question, how you wouldn't, to do some things, you actually wouldn't even need to log into Loomio. You could see, this is just a sort of demonstration default proposal thing. You can actually vote with these buttons right here in Slack. So you don't even need to log into Loomio to do some basic things. If you needed to leave a more detailed response or have a longer comment or something like that, you'd want to log into Loomio. But in terms of just sounds good, just hit the agree button right there in Slack, and it's done. And that makes a really big difference in terms of the group communication part, because one of the things that can be really hard when you're trying to sort of push a project that's being organized translocally is you don't even really know if anyone's reading your emails, you know what I mean? Or you'll send out a question and it just sort of floats there because you don't really get any feedback. This is a way to be able to get some feedback, even if it's just a little small signal like thumbs up or thumbs down. It can be really helpful to just kind of get that signal to help move things along. So that's Loomio, and then the last kind of digital communication is archival communication, and this is something that is probably pretty familiar to, especially those of us who have done historical research. We're familiar with archives, but the idea being that there are certain documents, certain kinds of communication that we want to kind of house somewhere. We want them to sort of live somewhere when they're done, right? And that they can be there and accessible for people to see. Maybe new people come and they see, set of group policies, for example, or statements that have been made by the group. Or publishing is an example of this, right? If we wanted to edit a magazine, right, that would be the final phase of things, right? Is that they live in a kind of fixed form after they've gone through the process of being hashed out by the group. And so you can kind of imagine these three kinds of communication as having a kind of directional flow to them, where the ideas at the beginning are kind of in the real-time chatty, working it out, figuring things out, brainstorming, creative kind of process, which is a really important piece. Then it'll get to a certain level of complexity where someone might be like, you know what, we might want to move this over to Loomio to kind of nail down what it is that we actually really want to do, what kind of decision we really want to make here. And that space affords us to do that. And then at the end, once the proposal is closed and we know what we're doing, we might want to document that and put it into our kind of archival space as saying, this is what we're doing, this is what we're working on, a monthly calendar or a, Google Drive, right? That's kind of going to be our kind of main space for that. And again, thanks to the, web, it's really easy to link one thing to another. So say we have a policy that lives on a Google Doc that has a link that can get shared in Slack, it can get posted on Loomio. And so all of the three pieces kind of connect to one another through that approach, even though we're not like doing everything on Google Drive or everything on Slack or everything on Loomio. There's a way that they're all kind of able to be interconnected so that we can actually get from, hey, this sounds like a neat idea, or like have a lot of energy around this topic or this conversation, all the way to actually doing things. And that is for me, like, especially I spent 7 years in a PhD program, and I'm very familiar with academics and like the beautiful big ideas that can come up, but at the end of the day, you got to actually do things, and so this is why I'm bringing this energy to this work, that is because I think that I really do think that the kind of beat writer mentality is a lot more conducive to doing things, because you're having to respond to real time in real time to things that are happening around you, in these communities that we care about. So that's my spiel portion of the evening. And so I do want to just take a minute to Howard, you're saying ahem?
I meant amen.
Amen. Okay.
I'm sorry.
So Alex, you see the depth of the problem. We're not just talking about digital world, we're talking about typing.
Hey, it's all good. It's all good. See, this is a perfect example where, if that was an email, right? Like I would have gotten the email tomorrow and I would have been like, what does Howard mean by ahem? And then I would have responded in an email and I would have been like, and maybe I would have CC'd a few of you other people and been like, Howard, what do you mean by ahem? And then maybe Howard would have responded and said, I meant amen, but he only responded to me. And the people who were CC'd are just left wondering you see what I'm saying about like the how of this is actually really important. The fact that we can do this in a space that's designed for real-time communication, in this case Zoom, allows for the kind of like relational bandwidth to actually like move forward and make things happen.
Yeah. Listen, I'm going to have to jump off here, but this has been a great introduction, really terrific, and I'm glad to see those of you I know and to meet those of you who I haven't known. And I'll depend on Alex, please, to send an email about loading some of these programs onto my computer and or phone so that I can continue to contribute.
Yeah, and I think that for getting started for Uniel and for everybody, like I'm kind of the reference point for all of this for now. So if you have any questions, troubleshooting, all that kind of stuff, feel free to reach out to me directly. And
Great,
as we develop, as we get these tools working, it'll be even easier to get a hold of me. So
terrific, man. Thanks so much.
all right, thanks, Neil.
See you, Neil.
Okay.
Thanks, Neil.
See you, Neil. Hey, Alex, I appreciate Howard's vote of confidence for my geekery, but Loomio is new to me. And so I jumped over to a browser and looked at it. And the splash page was impressively non-English, which was great. They had a bunch of groups from Algeria and a lot of Spanish-speaking groups. Is that a totally web-based product? Because there doesn't seem to be an iPhone app. And I'm on my phone a lot.
Their app is scheduled to roll out this fall. Currently, it's browser-based.
Okay.
But it's in development. And I do use it on my phone. I just have a web browser. Like I have the web browser page saved as a sort of location on my phone, and I can use it just fine on my phone that way.
Thanks.
It's not as like seamless as like the Slack app, for example, but it it works for what it needs to work for. John, the Loomio folks are actually based in New Zealand, so we have another New Zealand connection there. Yeah.
Yeah, we're a bit techie down here.
Yeah. So, yeah. Okay. So, are there any other just kind of questions about this framework for communication that I've
Well,
laid out?
I'm impressed that James Hale has been working, sounds like, also with some of these tools. And I'm thinking that, you know, I do a workaround because I guess on my email, well, about 20 hours a day, it seems like. So James, have you just like replaced, like Alex does, he's doing a lot of email, but you're doing a lot of work on Slate?
Yeah, Slack is it was the go-to at the advertising agency I worked for the last 4 years, and it's the go-to at Canopy Growth where I work now. One of the big advantages of Slack is you can set up private channels as well, so it's a great in-channel communications vehicle. You know, because we're in the cannabis business, we operate in a regulated space. Emails can be read by Health Canada, you know, and probably American regulators as well once we get into the States. So, I mean, it just gives you a back channel that way to exchange communications that's locked down. But yeah, to everything else that Alex said, it's a really robust system. I mean, probably like John Chacona. I mean, those of us who worked in marketing things, we've used a lot of these tools, and Slack is definitely, you know, if not the best, certainly one of the top two. And yeah, it's great. And it's from Berkeley, California. Alex, Andrew.
That's right.
Yeah.
Jeff, Andrew.
Well, then it sounds like the next things are trying to figure out what we're going to do with this, or at least when we're going to meet again to figure out what we're going to do with this, or, you know, how to set up Loomio so we can talk about when we're going to meet again to
Yeah.
piece that together.
So, I mean, I feel like what I would like to suggest for the next, 20 minutes or so is that we can just maybe imagine what some, like group project, just like do a brainstorm basically. And while we're thinking about like things that we could do together, I'm also going to go into Slack and Loomio and create like a login link for everybody, like a subscriber link, so that I'll post it in the chat, and then we can spend the last 10 minutes or so like troubleshooting, getting logged in with me online and available to help as we do it. So yeah, I mean, like I said at the beginning, I think the best place to start are like, what do you think would be helpful for the kind of work that you're doing? And what are the, I heard a couple of folks mention sort of opportunities and like sort of horizons of possibility that they're noticing in their local scene. So these are the kinds of things I think I'm really curious to hear about. And then if actually it would be really helpful if somebody who's not me could actually take notes in the chat, and then I can post, and then I can move those notes over to somewhere where we can all see it afterwards, because I'm going to be setting up, getting the login link. So any volunteers to just like take notes for the brainstorm.
Guys, I've actually got to jump out. My daughter's going to be home in a minute. So,
okay.
But thank you, Alex. It's great to see everyone. And yeah, we'll keep follow up on this. Looking forward to seeing.
Sounds good. To be continued.
Catch up again, Andy.
Yeah. Take care, all.
Thanks,
All
Andy.
right.
Good night.
I have a question.
Okay, question before we start. Sure.
Simply, it seems to me that Loomio must be good for if you're doing a project that involves a lot of interviews. Is that right?
Tell me more about what you're.
Well, I'm not actually working on anything right now, but I mean, I did a piece not long ago on some of the new young bands,
Mhm.
And I had to talk to a lot of dancers and a lot of the musicians and people involved in that scene. So it just seemed to me like the Loomio might be sort of a collage approach, or could provide that kind of thing. Does that sound right?
I mean, it's certainly helpful for if you want to like, it's good for asking questions to the group of people that are using it, right? Like the poll, for example, you know, like if you were seeing something that was arising in the scene of folks that you're interviewing, you know, and you wanted to ask the group of folks, you know, the JJA folks who are using it on Loomio, you know, how many people have encountered something similar, for example. You could make a little poll, you know, and people could respond. It would I don't know how you would set it up so that you could have like people that you were interviewing, like basically like interfacing with people who aren't like sort of a part of the group that are using it. But I feel like it could be what I was imagining in that case would be like as a way of just kind of getting a sense of like, are other people seeing this too, or is this you know, are there other similar resources in different places, right? Because again, what we have with this network is a really like robustly geographically diverse you know, set of people on the ground. And so our collective perspective on, you know, what the jazz beat is going to be different than if you know, asked just a bunch of people in New York, for example.
Right.
But you know, Peter, I think that you're onto something. That Chris Davis piece that I just did for Downbeat, I was doing interviews online via email. And so if Terry Lynn Carrington had been able to see Tony Malaby's response, they could have talked together, so-called, right? I'm getting, And I could have like invited other people into that Loomio thread, I assume, to get them involved in Loomio, and they would be able to find that thread. So you could have, I mean, I'm frequently doing interviews these days, well, not frequently, occasionally doing interviews through email. But this would be a way to get a group having that discussion as if they were in the green room, I guess you'd say.
Sure.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, Howard. You know, I think we tend to fall into the same patterns of reporting stories because of the limitations of our, you know, traditional technologies of, you know, picking up the phone and talking to one artist and calling somebody else, as opposed to, you know, combining them into a group of three or something and having a conversation. I think that'd be a lot more lively on the page.
Yeah. And Howard, by the way, we have met. Maybe you don't remember. I did a couple of pieces for a couple of book reviews for JJA, and you and I have met at one or two conferences.
I'm glad to hear that, and maybe meet again soon.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to pop a couple of links into the chat here. This first one is the invitation link for Loomio. So that is the one that will, if you click on that link, you'll be asked to like log in basically, and your account will get registered on Loomio. And then the next one is going to be Slack. Okay, and then here's the one for Slack. So the first thing you'll need to do is you know, set up your account with both of those, and then with Slack, the second thing is to actually download the app onto your computer or to your phone, or to your phone, wherever you're going to be using it. Like I said, I find it really useful in both contexts.
Alex, I'm not sure if you're the right person for administration, but for some reason I've dropped off the email list. And I've been in there and checked that my email's current, and it is. Did you just send something then?
So I just posted in the chat here. So if you click on chat in Zoom, you'll see two links. One, it says lumio.org and then a bunch of jumbo, and then another one that says join.slack.com and a bunch of blah, blah, blah. So those
Gotcha.
two links are the kind of portals to log you in to be able to use
My
JJA
bad. I
account.
was back with the old bad technology.
Right. Well, the other thing I will say about email is that both of these things, like Loomio sends a daily digest to your email of like what happened on Loomio yesterday. So if you're just checking your email, you can see, I mean, you can set your settings to have it communicate with your email in whatever way is helpful to you. And I think you can do that with Slack too, although I haven't done that. But yeah, there we go. Someone just joined Slack. Good job. So as we go, so I'd say like for this last time that we have, that feel free to, if you have questions for me or you want to kind of toss some ideas out there, we can do that. And then also if you want to try logging in and kind of troubleshooting if you're having any problems or whatever, that we can make this space available for both of those things.
Alex, how long will that, clicking on chat, I've got the list and all the links, how long will you leave that up there for?
For the link to the call, and then I'll copy it into I'll send out an email with these same links afterwards as well to the people who were here.
Okay.
And this is being archived, right? So will the participants get one of those Zoom emails saying, the recording you made of last night's webinar is available at this link?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Will we put that, should we put that on YouTube with the other
We could.
webinars?
Yeah, we could. That would be very easy to do. Yeah, Howard, let's follow up and figure that out.
Susan, do you want to say anything about the Jazz Heroes and the use of these things in that? I mean, John Fenton's been involved in the Jazz Heroes. James has. I'm afraid that you won't be this year, guys, but I don't know. Maybe so. Anyway, Susan, say something, please, about this.
Sure. What is it you would like me to say? Who's involved?
Well, we had spoke. You had mentioned at the beginning of the call, Susan, that you were kind of thinking about how this might be useful for the work that you're doing with the Jazz Heroes. So maybe we can talk about that a little bit.
Right. So going into a community and getting a consensus, right now I'm getting nominations from different people. It would be useful because we use Slack at the Sanctuary for Independent Media. So it's a useful way to build community and build consensus. And that's what you need to do when going into these communities, because a lot of times folks don't realize they have a jazz community. I'll call in and we do, but they do. And this is a way to unite them and another way of amplifying.
And one of the things we've done with the Jazz Heroes is to have events in which the heroes are presented with their awards, which is also really trying to engage the community around the heroes. The heroes are an excuse for that sort of thing. And this is a way that you could build that team that sets up the event, that works together on the media outreach to promote the event, and reaches out to other bloggers or radio stations or whatever, to try to invite people to the event and to promote the Jazz Hero. So it sounds like for the teamwork, specifically focused teamwork element could work out for us. And since Susan and I and whoever else we've got working on this committee tend to have 20 or more Jazz Heroes to present, then we could have separate threads for each of them.
Exactly.
It would be searchable, right?
Yeah, I mean, and just for starters, just having putting a Jazz Heroes channel on Slack can be a place that anyone who wants to see just what's going on with Jazz Heroes or has a question about Jazz Heroes, we can set that up. And also similarly, like if we want to have, this is where, when Susan was talking about, developing consensus and making decisions, that's where the, a Loomio thread for Jazz Hero decisions or updates could also be really useful.
A lot of those things are supposed to be private, so those discussions would not be available to everybody except, right?
Yeah, so if you wanted to create a private channel for this, so first of all, figuring out what everybody means. In this case, everybody is going to be everybody who's like opting in to this communications system that we're setting up, which it seems like right now is open to members and interested folks who reach out. So it's a pretty open container. Within that, you can also create private channels that are specific to specific individuals within that group. So for example, if everyone that you're working with in Jazz Heroes is on Slack, you could create a private channel where only those people can see what you're talking about. And you could also have a public channel where you could have conversations, announcements, whatever about it that's visible to other people who might be interested and curious. In fact, I feel like it's helpful to have as much conversation on Slack in public channels as you can, I feel like, because that way other people who are just curious, who are interested, right? Because if folks are opting in, it's because they're interested. It's a helpful way of just sort of sharing information without it being any extra work for you.
And I love the idea, am I muted now? I love the idea of all the different communities being able to connect in real time.
Right. And it could be that, if you're working with different groups, that, you have a sort of designated spokesperson from that group who's set up on Slack and set up on Loomio, who, can easily communicate into the sort of shared space that we have. And then also be, communicating with their whole local scene.
It makes things a lot easier.
Yeah, that's the idea.
I want to explain that the reason I said John Fenton and James Hale may not be involved in the Jazz Heroes is because we found that it's very difficult to send stuff overseas at this point, even over the border, toss it over the border. It's just become really costly, and the mailing and but maybe there would be a way again to have celebrations in April of significant characters in your vicinities, and we could find some way to honor them without making a statuette that we have to mail by physical post. So if you're interested in doing that, we should discuss it. I shouldn't just rule it out.
Yeah, I remember the trouble you had getting hold of the Australian trumpeter from Perth. And, I asked all the musicians in Australia and they said, oh man, he never answers his emails. No one knows where he lives. We just have to run into him at a gig.
Well, I did eventually get his award. I think I got his award too. He did correspond with me and I sent it to his address. I never heard from him whether he received it or not. So.
All his communication is through the trumpet, Howard.
I hear that. Well, are there other ideas that we might want to, to work on? I think that David and Peter especially, you guys haven't been involved in JJ programming at this particular level, and I'd like to make sure that that the invitation is open for that. We've tried to get stuff going in Kansas City a couple times, but really haven't had any representatives there to work with. Yeah.
I'm happy to be that person.
We had Calvin Wilson for a
Kansas
while.
City person.
I guess Calvin was there briefly.
What's that?
Yeah, Calvin did some stuff, I think back in the early aughts.
Right.
James was also vice president of the JJ for a while and then found better things to do. But we keep him in the loop anyway. And Peter, you said you were living, I'm sorry, I spaced. Where?
Newton, Massachusetts.
Newton.
Yeah, just outside of Boston.
Right. So I've been working with Bob Blumenthal there to try to come up with a Jazz Hero. And he says that he doesn't really have time to do this, but I'm going to kick his butt. And we need to have some representation, I think. So if you're interested in that.
When you're talking about jazz heroes, I think you're talking about people who support jazz in very generous ways. Is that right?
Well, we talk about it as altruists, activists, advocates, altruists, aiders, and abettors of jazz.
That's easy for you to say.
We used to call it the A-Team, and then we made it Jazz Heroes because that was easier to say. So these have been everybody from educators, philanthropists, the instrument repair guy in, what was his name, Susan?
Boston.
Yeah, in Boston. Was it Sal? No, the guy who did all the saxophone work for everybody. This year, we may be thinking again about Rand Blake. But we look at it as a nationwide slate of heroes, or maybe a global slate of heroes. So we're trying to find diversity in the professions, of course, in age and gender and race and everything. And we balance the nominees that come in from our various network nodes to try to come up with a slate that looks like jazz in our communities.
Jazz heroes generally don't get a lot of attention in their communities. They go over and above what their job is. It's not their job description. It's over and above their job description.
Right. So we have given it to presenters. We've given it to a couple veteran broadcasters or writers, but really medics or people providing services that we don't necessarily think about, but that are really supportive and appreciated by the jazz world are the people we're looking for. Curators, we gave it to a woman who she's established a free festival outside the library in the Black neighborhood in Denver, and ran that for several years. That was a good one. All the jazz heroes are posted at jjjazzawards.org, and there's a drop down for jazz heroes, and you can see them by the year. And there's bios of each of them, photos. We created a collage of all of their portraits, and that's a visual asset that goes out on Facebook and gets tweeted out. It's a useful promotional deal. And we encourage the local community to really rally around these people and give them some love. And originally we thought that these are the kind of people who could get personal interest stories, like feature stories in newspapers or other platforms. I think that's happened to some extent. We need to have people on the ground at each of the locales where we give a jazz hero, because it is a local organizational event. And the JJ kind of is the umbrella public relations arm of it, besides being the initiator.
Yeah, let me add, Howard, that at least from my experience here in Ottawa, it was a great platform as well to get what we do and also what Jazz Heroes do into other avenues we wouldn't normally reach. One of the Jazz Heroes we did here in Ottawa, I got the mayor to come and give him the key to the city, and also he was an adjunct prof at a university, so the president of the university came, and then the music department got more interested in what Jazz in Ottawa was doing. So yeah, it's a great springboard into other places you can't normally reach or can't reach easily.
Yeah, it has worked that way. Yvonne Irvin, one of our late board members, and she was a VP also, did some great work in Tucson and Arizona in general. And it was always getting the governor or the mayor out to toast the Jazz Heroes, and they would have events on the city hall stairs, big public events. And that's also happened in Los Angeles recently with Edith Bronston from the California Jazz Foundation has been really supportive of the Jazz Heroes Project, and she's been able to ramp up the event. So they've been at the Los Angeles Contemporary Art Museum, LACMA, So we've had some fun with that. I think it has enlivened the community. Originally, we did it because there was, despite the Smithsonian talking about April being Jazz Month and then International Jazz Day at the end of it, there was really nothing being offered to localities to do for themselves. No way to get attention on their own communities. So we thought we could piggyback with the other organizations to try to encourage programming, enable programming. But the idea was to get the communities to do that programming themselves. They should learn how to use media, including blogging, including handbills, including, you know, just anything to get your media around, and use it to promote somebody everybody in the community liked. So that would be a good thing. That's just all plus, plus, plus. Alex, I think we're kind of running out here.
Yeah, well, so as we're sort of wrapping up, I just wanted to basically close by saying, you know, I'm available to help. So we're going to be doing these weekly for February is the plan. So feel free to join us, the same link, same time. We'll be back here on Zoom next week at 8 p.m. Eastern on next Tuesday to continue the conversation and to start to deepen a little bit into using some of these tools. And so for this week, if everyone can, who would like to continue to participate, can get logged into Slack, get logged into Loomio. You can try introducing yourself in the introduction thread in Loomio. That's currently the only thread that's there, and I'll probably start adding some things as well, but for now you can try that as a way of just using Loomio. And then also try send me a direct message in Slack, so you know that how to send a direct message in Slack, and I know that you know how to send a direct message. And then post something in how about just post something in the general channel, like it can be a link, it could be just a little message, it can be a thought that you had about, you know, the call, but just try you know, posting something in both of those places as a way of just starting to get used to it, and also letting me know that you're continuing to engage. And if you have any trouble doing any of those things, please reach out. My email address, if all else fails, is alex@jazzjournalist.
Alex, I will say that I tried to set up my profile in Loomio and it's frozen. So
Okay.
I don't know if you found it's a little bit buggy before or what, but I'll back out of it and try it again, but it's just wanted to let you know it's frozen.
Okay, that's good to know. Yeah, and that's good to report back to me if that kind of thing happens too, because I'm, you know, I can also reach out to their support folks if we're having issues.
Cool.
That kind
That'd
of
be
stuff.
great. Thanks.
So I've used this program with some other projects, and yeah, so I know that bug.
Good to know.
Yeah.
If it was designed in New Zealand at this time of the year, the programmers might be at the beach.
Distinctly possible. Yeah.
What time is it there, John?
It's about 3, coming up to 3:30.
What day is it though?
It's tomorrow.
It's tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's tomorrow.
Who won the caucus, man?
But the tragic part is we've still been watching the impeachment and the debacle. Oh God, you can't escape it anywhere on this planet, man.
Oh God.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, God.
Had to say.
All right, that was a
All
Just
right.
turn it off and listen to some music, you know.
There you go.
Amen.
All right. Well,
Thanks a lot,
continued,
everybody.
I look forward to seeing you all in our new spaces that we're starting to build, and back on here on Zoom next week. We'll continue. I think next week we can really open up the brainstorm piece a little bit more and start thinking about what we can start doing together.
All right.
Cool.
Thank you,
All right.
Alex.
Thanks,
Thanks
Alex.
everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Yeah,
Thank you.
great to be with you. Thank you.